With the NFL draft over and done with, it is time to go out and give our grades to each and every single team. I have 8 videos lined up for you guys, each and every division, and letting you know how I felt about each and every team, what they did in their premium picks, their trades, their reaches, their steals. I wanted to give some context behind what these grades actually mean when I hand them out, and especially for day 3, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Days 1 and 2, the value and how good of a pick they were, but for day 3, I'm not going to sit here and hyper-analyze every single team's, 6th and 7th round pick and nitpick them and say, well, he was wide receiver 28 on my board and, you took him over wide receiver 24. It's like, at that point, it's just a little annoying to just go and nitpick every single draft pick. So most day 3 picks will be C plus, a fine pick. I'm not gonna like overly bury a team for that. C minus, I'll have picks that maybe I'm not as much of a fan of, but still, it's a 6th and 7th rounder. If you get a B minus, it's like that's a nice pick. I'm interested. I think that was a solid pick, a solid fit, decent value. If you get a B or better, and there was plenty of day 3 picks that got B plus, even A pluses in day 3, so that kind of scales upwards for how good of a value and how good of a pick that you made. I put in a lot of effort during this draft season, making sure I had like over 200 players scouted and got everything down, graded these things, and got the videos up to you as quick as I possibly can, so any support would be much appreciated. But I will be going through each of these teams in their divisions, I guess from worst to best, among the 4 teams. So let's get into our first team. Going worst to best in the NFC South, we start with the New Orleans Saints, who had one of my least favorite drafts of the entire weekend as they start from the top. They go Kelvin Banks at number 9, and I think that's a little bit higher than what I would have liked to take Kelvin Banks. I very much understand it, though, with the issues with Ryan Ramczyk and everything that they have had to deal with. Trevor Penning has been not good, even though he was maybe a little bit better last year, still not good. And, they should at least be able to put themselves in a spot where after taking 2 offensive linemen in consecutive years with high draft picks, that they could start to rebuild themselves on the offensive line. So while I don't love the player at the spot, I do understand it. So I can't fault them too much for it, even if it's a little higher than what I would have taken him. What I can fault them for is maybe having my least favorite day 2 of the draft, arguably. I think the conversation obviously needs to be had. Tyler Shough at 40. I don't love that at all. Tyler Shough had kind of gained a bit of a following throughout the draft process of a section of people who really liked him, and they thought that top 50 was maybe a good spot for him to go, and of all the other non-Cam Ward quarterbacks, that this was maybe the guy that they kind of wanted to bet on. For me, I just don't see it with Shough. He's old, obviously. I don't think we need to really dive into that. We know that he is an older prospect. He's going to be, 26 years old during the season. But even just aside from that, the age is just a piece of it. Quarterbacks, when it comes to, age and prospects, is less problematic to take. I am not a fan of taking, a 24-year-old or older player. But with the quarterback, I'm fine taking, a 24-year-old quarterback. Quarterbacks just play longer than other positions. So I don't have to worry about the dude's prime being over, in a couple of years or whatever the case is. Quarterbacks can play a long time. They have good longevity. 26 maybe is a little more on the side of things where I'm like, maybe I prefer not to. But even just as the player, I mean, this is a guy who you could definitely tell he is been a guy who's gotten so many injuries. He's scared, in a sense, to take hits. He's scared at times, and I brought this up a little bit in my top 100 video because he didn't make my top 100 overall prospects. You could kind of tell with him that he's been banged up, and he maybe releases the football a hitch too early. He doesn't stand and deliver. He doesn't he won't stand in the pocket, take a shot, and deliver a pass. He doesn't do that. He will bail a little early, not out of clean pockets, but bail from the play to avoid taking hits at times. He also is just a little passive in moments for me. Weirdly enough, I feel like they just took Derek Carr. Derek Carr is just like that, where he's like this frustratingly passive quarterback at times who just bails the structure of the play to just opt for something safer, maybe to the completion percentage will look higher, maybe some less turnovers, but like he just kind of limits your ceiling for what he gives you as an overall quarterback. He does have an NFL arm, I will say that. Like he does have some nice arm talent. I don't think it's crazy arm talent, but he's got some nice arm talent. I think he is an NFL caliber quarterback, just not a second round one. Like for me, I thought Kyle McCord was better. Like I think I'm betting more on Kyle McCord to be a better quarterback long term than Tyler Shough. Maybe that's a little controversial. I'm just not a fan of Tyler Shough though, and to take him at 40, I don't know what this really does for the Saints. Like, I really don't, because the Saints just need to bottom out. They have so much cap issues. They have so many, like, weird players who are, like, kind of win now players, but they're not a win now team. And this has been a team that's tried so hard to force a winning window in a time when they just don't have it. They tried to make the move for Derek Carr. They've kept around some of these other players that have really just needed to go. And finally this year, it felt like they were trying to deconstruct a little bit. They traded Marshawn Lattimore. They were fine letting some of these other pieces go. And you were thinking, man, maybe they could just bottom out, be bad. Like, I don't, be bad. Like, for once, this is this instance where, like, just be bad. Like, I don't care what the situation is. You need to clear the money. You need to get good draft picks. You need to start building a foundation. Drafting Tyler Shough doesn't really excite me if I'm a Saints fan. And I understand Derek Carr's not going to be able to play next year potentially, but I mean, it's not like I want to see Tyler Shough in there. For me, I'm just like, man, just throw in Spencer Rattler, go 3 wins and figure out the rest, because like, what are we doing here? Like, I don't know what the plan for the Saints is, what they think taking Tyler Shough's going to do for them. I mean, maybe there is a world where Tyler Shough becomes a nice quarterback and he's the guy, but like, I don't think so. And a 40th overall pick, I know it's not a first round pick, but the 40th pick in the draft, that's a premium pick. Like, there's a lot of good players on the board at number 40. A lot of guys who slipped through the cracks of the first round. I mean, there's some really good players on the board. They could have taken one of them, but they opted to take a old, scared, limited ceiling quarterback, I feel like. And, at least with Jackson Dart, I see the vision with Jackson Dart. I see some upside. I still wouldn't have taken him first round. I still wouldn't have taken him second round, but at least I see something there. I don't see anything with Tyler Shough to where I'm like, yeah, I got to take Tyler Shough. I gotta make sure I have him on my team because he could be something. I could be wrong about that. That's part of this, where you just kind of stake your claim and say, like, I just don't believe in this guy, but I just don't believe in Tyler Shough. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, though, and I'll be happy to just say, in a couple of years' time, like, yeah, I was wrong about Tyler Shough. I've been wrong about players before, but, I just don't believe in him, I guess is the way I can go about it. And, I mean, that wasn't the only pick in day 2 that I wasn't a fan of. Jonas Sanker from Virginia, the safety. Didn't really love that one. He was pretty low on my safety board. Wasn't a guy I would have considered in the 3rd round. I know it's a late 3rd round pick, but, I thought one of the lesser picks of day 2. I did actually, though, didn't mind Vernon Broughton. He was a little bit lower on my board. He was still a top 100 player, though, and I do think Broughton does provide you a little bit more of an upside. And, he was kind of lost due to, like, Alfred Collins and a lot of these other Texas players. He was kind of the guy who flew under the radar a little bit for a lot of people. And, not a lot of people talked about Vernon Broughton maybe as much as they should. But I think he actually does provide a higher ceiling than a guy like Alfred Collins, if you can kind of mold him a little bit. But overall, you look at day 1 and day 2, you got Kelvin Banks, who, yeah, that's going to be a long-term offensive lineman for you. You got Vernon Broughton, who is a developmental defensive lineman for you. And I think you got a backup safety and a backup quarterback. But I do think that the Saints actually had a pretty nice day 3. The pick that I'm most excited for, and I think the pick that if I were a Saints fan, I'd be really hyped for, Danny Stutzman. 4th rounder. I thought one of the best picks of the 4th round. I love me some Danny Stutzman. He was a player who, going into the season and throughout the early parts of the season, I was seeing in like some 1st round mocks, some 2nd round, top 50, like he was a player who's kind of up there, and I just feel like he just Oklahoma, they had a down year. Stutzman, maybe didn't take like a massive leap forward and having a crazy year, but like Stutzman is pretty good. Like for me, he was my linebacker 3. There was the obvious top 2 with Jihad Campbell and Swessinger, but for me, among the rest of the lot of linebackers, I really like Stutzman the most, and I think that this is your guy post Demario Davis. So if I were a Saints fan, I'm sitting here thinking, well, I think at the very least we got ourselves our starting linebacker in the post Demario Davis era, and I think this could be a guy who's gonna be 5, 6, 7 year starter for you. I think he has a lot to offer this team, so that's the pick I'm excited about if I'm a Saints fan. And then you go and get Quincy Riley, also in the 4th round, which pretty nice pick. Riley, this is a cornerback class that very much falls off past the top like 10 to 12 guys. And then once you get to day 3, it's just kind of like, who do you like? Quincy Riley did have a nice season in 2023. And, while last year wasn't as good, I still feel like there's some good tape in there. And he's a player that I think fits well with the Saints. And I also think is going to eventually take over a starting role for this team. So I really like their 4th round. Then in the 6th round, you go and get Devin Neal, who about as rock solid as it gets. Maybe not a high upside crazy player, but for a team that does need some running back help, they did try to bring in like Jamal Williams at one point, and Alvin Kamara is getting up there in age, but this is a team, I think what also Kendre Miller didn't really pan out up until this point. They've had some other guys kind of float around, but I think Devin Neal's going to at least carve out a nice role this year, I think, even as the number 2 running back on this team. I don't think he's ever going to be a long-term out-and-out starter for them, but for a guy who can get you a reliable maybe 100 touches a year and do a decent job with it, I think Devin Neal can do that for you. So I think that little 3-pick run right there, Stutzman, Riley, and Neal, is what kind of keeps them out of the bottom tier for me. I still put them in the 27th to 29th tier, where it's like, it's not a good draft, but not the worst. There are worse. There are a couple of worse drafts, but I at least come out of here saying, okay, you got a starting lineman, a potential starting defensive lineman. I think you got your linebacker of the future. I think you got a potential starting corner, a potential rotational running back, but I think you whiffed in day 2 as a whole, and maybe I'll be proven wrong about Tyler Shough, but I just don't see it with him. And here is probably where I will catch maybe the most flack for, because I at least understand, like, there's going to be a lot of people who don't like those quarterbacks either. Don't like Dart, don't like Shough, don't like even Shador, don't like all these other guys not named Cam Ward. I know a lot of people do like Jalen Walker. I just didn't. I talked about him a decent amount in my top 100 list. I had him as my number 75 overall prospect. I had him really low, and there were a lot of people who, even the people who are low on Jalen Walker, were kind of scared to put him too low because they didn't want to look really stupid. And man, I might look really stupid in a couple of years if Jalen Walker ends up becoming the Micah Parsons that some people try to say he is. I would be more inclined to say that that's not going to happen. But yeah, in a couple of years, I could look stupid for being low on Jalen Walker and, really hammering in how low I am on him. But I just don't love Jalen Walker. I mean, this is a player who I see as not a great edge, but, an even worse linebacker. He played linebacker a decent amount. He's pretty useless in coverage a lot of the times. So then you're like, okay, well, he's a good interior pass rusher from the linebacker spot. He's a great blitzing linebacker. And it's yeah, he is. I think Jalen Walker's going to walk in to the NFL and be one of the top 5 blitzing middle linebackers in the league, or an off-ball linebacker. If you line him up at that spot and you blitz him, he'll be one of the best in the league at that. Do you know who that is? It's Devin White. That's what Devin White does. And Devin White's been struggling to stick to a job outside of Tampa Bay, once Tampa Bay got rid of him. So it's okay, well, what else does he do? Is he just Devin White? No, he's more than Devin White, because he also can play edge a little bit. He can do a little bit more than that. But also, I'm sitting here saying, Jalen Walker, to me, is a really good role player. He's a really nice utility role player who, can give you some stunts, some loops, loop around, give you some Josh Uche sacks sometimes where, he gets a lot of unblocked stuff and uses his athleticism to get to the quarterback pretty quickly. But in terms of just being a a winner on the edge. I don't think he's going to win much. And in terms of being a great off-ball linebacker, I don't think he's going to be that. So I don't think he's a great edge. I don't think he's a great off-ball linebacker. I think he's a designated pass rusher in certain instances. Just like he's a role player to me, and that's just kind of how I see it. And maybe he blows me out of the water with the fact that he is just a much better pass rusher than I'm giving him credit for from the edge. I'm not taking away anything from his interior pass rush abilities from the linebacker spot. I think he's like I said, one of the 5 best in the league day one from the linebacker spot. I just don't like his edge production and his edge winning ability. But I will also acknowledge Georgia never uses their players ideally. It's been a problem for years when trying to evaluate Jalen Walker, Mykel Williams, Trayvon Walker, a couple of other guys where you try to evaluate them. And it's like, man, can Georgia just use these guys properly? It's been a bit of an issue. So I can at least acknowledge maybe there was some misuse at Georgia, but that's just not a guy I'm taking at 15. And it's funny because like the Falcons had no intentions of leaving this draft looking like this, because they were going to take James Pierce at 15 because they just thought there was no way Jalen Walker's making it to 15. They thought Jalen Walker was going to be long gone by then. So the fact that he made it to 15, they were like, well, okay, we'll just take Jalen Walker instead because we didn't think he'd be here. And then when James Pierce made it to 26, they're like, okay, well, we wanted James Pierce originally, so let's just go and trade up for James Pierce. It's just it's an interesting class because this would be really good if I really believed in Jalen Walker. I just don't. And a lot of people, it's funny, a lot of the people are like burying them for the James Pierce trade and the James Pierce pick when I think that was a much better move. To me, James Pierce is who they just should have taken at 15. It's who I would have taken at 15. I mean, maybe I guess you could say they could have traded down and still taken him, but like James Pierce was for me like a top 10 player in the draft, was my number 2 edge rusher. I think is an awesome pick. I do ding it a little bit because I did have to dive into next year's draft assets and give up a first. I do think James Pierce is worth giving up a potential first round pick next year if you believe that you're going to make the playoffs next year. Like if you were to tell me, yeah, we'll trade the 20th overall pick next year so we can get James Pierce this year. Like, yeah, I think I would do that. Like, I don't think that's crazy. My issue is just like, you should just taken him to begin with because I just think he's the better player. I think James Pierce is a true edge rusher. I think James Pierce flashes dominance. I think James Pierce has number 1 true edge rush potential. And for a team that has just been abysmal at taking edge rushers year after year after year and has never been able to find a guy aside from one good year of Vic Beasley. I mean, when's the last time the Falcons have had a consistently good edge rusher? It's like John Abraham? Like, it's been a while. So for this team, I think they finally got it right with James Pierce. It just came at the expense of them spending the 15th pick on Jalen Walker, in my opinion. We'll call it a fall, but I wouldn't have taken him in the first round. I would have maybe considered him in the second round, but I wouldn't have wanted to take him. Like, he wasn't a top 50 player for me. And that's just, I understand he's a good leader, good, like, personality, good. He's got intangibles, and I do very much value those, but it's like, I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done as a player, and maybe he can grow into more than a role player for me. And I do think having James Pierce with him helps a lot. I would have been really worried if they just selected Jalen Walker and that was it, because then it's like, wow, you're asking him to do a lot. Now, Jalen Walker doesn't need to be the guy, because I think James Pierce will be the guy. But, can he be the number 2? I think there's a better chance of that. Do the Falcons have their edge rush duo of the future where these guys are going to both be racking up 10 sacks a season? Maybe. I don't know. I'm just not a Jalen Walker guy. I know a lot of people are, but I also know a lot of people don't like Jalen Walker. He was one of the more divisive players in this draft, so there's going to be some massive pushback on the grade, but there's also going to be some people probably agreeing, I also will preface this by saying, just because I give your team a bad grade doesn't mean I hate your team. I don't hate any of your team, and I don't hate any of the players in this draft class. I don't hate Jalen Walker, the person. He's a good dude. The only people I hate in this draft class are like Mike Green, But Jalen Walker, I'll root for him, but I just didn't see it with it. And then it is what it is. You just have those players sometimes. This draft, though, was also a little confusing to me for another reason, because they go and double up with Jalen Walker and James Pierce, and you're like, okay, the situation presented themselves for that to happen. But then they do it again with their next 2 picks, and I'm like, man, you got a really great pick with Xavier Watts. I thought that was a phenomenal pick. And I even went out and said, like, because I was live tweeting during the draft, and I was like, man, Xavier Watts and Jesse Bates, it's like the smartest safety duo in the NFL. Like, that's going to be such a fun safety duo. And, you know, like I said, the smartest safety duo potentially in the league. And I'm like, man, that's going to be awesome. And then, you know, a little bit later, they go and take Billy Bowman. And it's like, why? Because Billy Bowman is a very unique player. Probably like the shortest arms in the NFL. And, also like one of the worst tacklers in like ever. Missed over 25% of his tackles, or roughly 25% of his tackles. And yeah, he's a good coverage player, but like he can't tackle to save his life, and that's not his fault because he's also got like the shortest arms ever. But you didn't need a safety to do that. I mean, you need a guy to just cover. You got Jesse Bates and you drafted Xavier Watts. It's like, well, what do you need Billy Bowman for? I mean, not to say he's never going to get used. Teams use 3 safeties, but it's like, I didn't feel like that was a necessary pick. I am interested in just to see if Billy Bowman could be a decent NFL player. Like, he is a fascinating player to see if he can be good, because it's like the shortest arms ever. It was like 0 percentile arms with no ability to tackle, and like that's at the college level. He missed like 25% of his tackles. Imagine when it's going to be at the NFL level. That thing's going to probably go up to like 30-something%, which, I mean, that's going to make it hard for him to just play. That means it's also like, I don't even think he can play special teams. Like, this is a dude where it's like, if you're taking him, you're like hoping that he could just play center field safety and you don't have to put him in tackling positions, but it's like, you don't need that. You got Jesse Bates and Xavier Watts to play safety for you. So I don't know where Billy Bowman slots into this defense, but I'm interested. And then you get Jack Nelson, who's going to be a tackle in the 7th round. It was a draft class of just 5 picks. And the thing is, if you take the Jalen Walker pick out of it, A-, A-, B-, C+, solid stuff. So just 5 picks, but it's like the higher value pick that you potentially mess up, the more it docks your grade. I think the Jalen Walker pick was a bad pick. I mean, I would think a lot higher of this draft class if they just selected James Pierce at 15 and went to work with the rest of their picks, picked up Xavier Watts and whoever else, and I probably would have given this a nice grade. The grade here, though, is just my, I guess, disapproval of Jalen Walker, which, you know, maybe in a couple of years I'll look like an idiot when he goes and turns into Michael Parsons, but maybe I'll look smart if he turns into Devin White, you know? Maybe somewhere in between. I don't know. We'll see where that ends up shaking out, but that's going to be one of the ones where it's either I'm going to be really right about or I'm going to be really wrong, and I hope I'm not wrong. Well, you know, if I'm wrong, then like good for him. If I'm right, then cool for me. But I guess, you know, I'll be rooting for him. So in a sense, I kind of hope I'm wrong. But, you know, either way, either I'm right or he's a greght player. Now we get into the Carolina Panthers, who I thought had a really nice draft class. So I gave them an A-. They were 6th to 9th in the tier 2 of teams, so just off that A. And man, we need to stop with this. I'll just say off the bat, Tet is not a bad pick. See too many people be like, man, why'd they take Tet? Because he's really good? Because he's a great player? Because he's a true number 1 wide receiver? Because in no time he'll probably be a top 20 wide receiver in the NFL? Because he is awesome for Bryce Young to have? Because he's going to be a great perimeter player? He could probably play a little bit in the slot if he wanted to. He's going to be able to be an 1,000-yard guy each and every single year. And I don't care that you took a wide receiver in the 1st round last year. Xavier Legette ain't nearly as good as Tet McMillan, and Xavier Legette isn't stopping you from taking Tet. You know, Legette for me was never a guy who I see number 1 upside, and I'm like, okay, you take Legette in the 1st round, which I didn't love Legette in the 1st round, but I'm like, okay, if you take him there, you know, you're probably never expecting him to be a number 1, but can he be a great number 2 for you? Well, you need a number 1 still. Tet's the number 1. And, you know, they were like, well, why didn't you take an edge rusher? It's like, well, Tet's better than all the other edge rushers. Even if they took James Pierce here, who was my number 2 edge rusher, it wouldn't have been as high of a grade as if they took Tet. For me, Tet was my number 5 player overall in the draft, and him going at 8, that looks good to me. And it's like, yeah, also, this goes back to, like, You got a young quarterback on a rookie contract. Well, let's give him everything he needs to succeed. What does he need to succeed? Give him a number one receiver, and he's got that now. And now this receiving core looks pretty fun. Where you got Tet, you got Xavier Legette, you got some of these other guys. You got Adam Thielen there, I'm pretty sure. Jalen Coker. You also brought in a couple of other players like undrafted free agents. I think they brought in like Hudson from UCF to come in. They brought in a couple of other players. You got guys on that room. They just signed Hunter Renfrow too, I'm pretty sure. It's like you're giving them some weapons. I like that. Give them some weapons to be able to actually go out here and thrive with. The receiving core last year wasn't good even with Legette. Give them some weapons. They did that, and I thought it was great. And you're like, okay, well, you need an edge rusher still. What do? I think it makes it more than worth it because you go and get Nick Scorton in the second round at 51. Scorton, to me, was a guy who I wouldn't have knocked the team too hard if they wanted to take him late in the first round. I had him mid 30s on my board, 1 to 2 in terms of round talent. I was like, if a team took him, late 20s, early 30s, I wouldn't have knocked him too hard for it. And I was like, okay, well, if he doesn't go in the first round, he should be one of the first, 10 guys selected in the second round. I thought the Bears were going to take him. I thought a couple of other teams could have taken him. They didn't. Well, okay, well, the Panthers will take him here. And it's funny because for so long, because Scorton was one of those other players like a James Pierce, like some of these other guys who, going into the season, the hype for Scorton was pretty high, where, you got those early mock drafts, and it was like Scorton was a unanimous, top 10, 15 pick for a lot of people. And I remember early on making these mock drafts, and I had Scorton to the Panthers a lot, because I'm like, man, I really like if, Scorton comes out here at Texas A&M and has the type of season that we think we can have, that, the Panthers go and select him top 10. Well, he doesn't have as good of a season as you might think. He slips a little bit. Well, the Panthers still ended up with him, but they got him in the second round, and I still think that's a phenomenal pick for a player who I do think is first round good, just Texas A&M doesn't use their players properly. Texas A&M has these weird alignments. Shamar Stewart had these issues. Scorton had these issues. Walter Nolan had these issues until he transferred, and look what happened when Walter Nolan transferred. He has a blow-up season and becomes a top pick. Texas A&M just has these weird usages with these defensive linemen, and they just don't know how to, let these guys commit to being one thing. And, more and more nowadays, it's like teams in college aren't prepping these players for the NFL. Teams are trying to prep these players to be as successful as they can at the college level and not really caring as much at the NFL level. That's why you see it with offensive linemen too. Everyone just throws their best offensive lineman at tackle because that helps the college team. That may not help the guy in the future because he might play guard at the NFL level and might not be an NFL tackle, but it helps the college team. These college programs don't prep players for the NFL as much. Nick Scorton wasn't really prepped for the NFL as much as he should have been. They just kind of threw him out there and, said, you're a great athlete, go win. He won sometimes, but he wasn't always put in the best positions to succeed. And I think going out there in Carolina where he's going to get a chance to get some early play time, develop his skills, and work on just committing to being one area of the defense, being in one spot, he's going to be really good, I think. And I think we could look back on, man, how did Nick Scorton go to pick 51? This is a guy we thought could be a first-round pick, and maybe he should have been a first-round pick. I think that's going to turn out to age very well. So, for all the people who are like, man, you didn't take an edge in round 1, well, I think you took a really good one in round 2, and on top of that, you took a number 1. And I'd much prefer having Tet and Nick Scorton than whoever else at number 8, even my number 2 edge, taking James Pierce in round 1, and then taking whoever in round 2, whoever was available at wide receiver at pick 51. I think that would have been a better combo, So I think they got the best outcome there. And then, well, they need an edge still. You're going to complain about not establishing, edge presence. Well, you go and take Princely Umanmielen in the 3rd round. It's like, did they need to do that? Probably not, but, well, maybe you got your edge rush duo of the future here because he could work out. I think at the very least, early on in his career, he's going to be a very fun number 3 to have on your team. And if you can get some more polish on him and make him a little bit more usable on some of the early downs, maybe you do have a nice 1-2 punch here with Scorton and Princely. So I love all of that, and I love what they were able to do with their first 3 picks. I think they nailed it. Then you go to day 3, thought they had some nice picks. Trevor Etienne, a little higher than I would have thought. Maybe, even though I didn't rank him that bad, that was pretty close to where I had him on my big board. I didn't think he would go, like, earlier in the fourth round to a team like the Panthers. This obviously, it stinks for Jonathan Brooks, I do think, because, like, they need a number two, and Jonathan Brooks, just can't stay. He hasn't been able to stay healthy, and he didn't play last year, basically. Not much at all. He's not going to play next year, most likely. So it's like, man, what does that say for Jonathan Brooks if they were comfortable taking a guy like ETN, who I do think has some upside to him, and there is a very good chance that he assumes that number two role that Jonathan Brooks would have had. So, stinks for Jonathan Brooks, but it's a good opportunity for Trevor Etienne, where, when Shough Hubbard needs to come off for some plays, I think Etienne can give you something. I think he has, like I said, among all the day three running backs, some of the higher upside. Now, there was questions about why he even came out to begin with, and maybe he was a little bit better at Florida than he was at Georgia, and I think there's some stuff that you need to work on there, but I do like the upside of ETN. I do think he can provide you a really nice 1-2 punch, and if him and Shough Hubbard, if you're looking back at them in a couple of years saying, like, this is one of the more, underrated, fun running back duos, I'm not going to be surprised by that. Then, other fourth round pick, Lathan Ransom. I think at the very least, Ransom is going to be an awesome special teamer for you, but I do think provides some potential as that, close to the line, box safety. I think he can get some play as a good number 3 safety for you. So, good special teamer / potential number 3 box safety, maybe even a number 2 safety if he gets to that spot. But I think there's some stuff there. Cam Jackson, I thought was their best pick of day 3. I think that's going to be an awesome pick for pick 140 to be able to just plug in as a rotational defensive lineman. I think he's going to help out a lot. Then you go 5th and 6th round, and how about get some more weapons? Mitchell Evans at tight end. You've had some stuff with Jatavion Sanders. He got banged up last year. I thought was an awesome 4th round pick last year, but had some injury issues kind of ran into. And, well, why not take a guy like Mitchell Evans to potentially, if Jatavion Sanders doesn't work out or whatever the case is, Mitchell Evans is another player that could potentially take that role. Then you go Jimmy Horn in the 6th round. I think that's a pretty solid 6th round pick. I'm interested in Jimmy Horn. He did actually go later. I'm pretty sure LeJohntay Wester got taken before Jimmy Horn, which I thought was a little interesting. But for the 6th round, I think Jimmy Horn's a valid pickup. So, this team did what I think they should have done. They went out there and they got Tet, they got ETN, they got Jimmy Horn, Mitchell Evans, a bunch of players to go and try to help Bryce Young maximize the amount of people he has to throw to, the amount of times he can go out there and make plays. Maybe they could have done a little bit more to, like, go on the offensive line, but I think their offensive line has talent. They just need to, play a little bit better. But, they went out there, gave him weapons, and then their biggest other need was edge rusher, and they drafted 2 edge rushers, and 2 edge rushers that I think could be really nice, especially Nick Scorton. So it's hard for me to give this anything other than a good grade. I think Tet, it's overhated how this Tet pick, he's awesome. Like, we need to stop disrespecting Tet. He's so good. I feel like if there was one team that, like, drafted for me, that just drafted all these players that I like, it was the Buccaneers, man. This team, Todd Bowles, I love this dude so much. He is just, you ever have like a coach or a philosophy that a team uses that just aligns with you so much? It's like every single year this team takes the player you like, or every single year this team takes players you like. It's the Buccaneers for me. Every single year, the defensive backs especially, they just take the guy I like. Last year, my dude was Tyke Smith. I love Tyke Smith. I put a 1st to 2nd round grade on him. I love Tyke Smith. They go and snag him in the 4th round, and, well, it was one of the steals of the draft because Tyke Smith was awesome in his rookie season. Then they go years before that. They go with Zion McCollum. I love Zion McCollum. I wanted him in Washington. They go and take him. Well, he's a starting corner for them now. This one, not as much of a sleeper, but I loved Antoine Winfield years ago. They go and pick him. He's among the best safeties in the league. And then this year, it's like, who were some players that I really liked? I like Ben Morrison. Now, Ben Morrison wasn't like some crazy sleeper player, but like, they go and sit there and say like, well, Ben Morrison's really good. If the hip injury isn't an issue, that's a starting corner for us. Okay, we got that. And then who was a player that I really hyped up a little bit? I had him in my top 100 pretty comfortably. It's a player that I really liked, Jacob Parrish, as a guy who I think has some ability to play outside and inside as the nickel corner and the outside corner. And I think it's a really nice investment to go and grab Jacob Parrish because, if Ben Morrison is not you know, maybe as healthy as you would like, or maybe the hip injury is a little bit more of a problem, then well, you got Jacob Parrish to fall on. And you're sitting there, and I'm looking at their secondary, and I'm like, their entire secondary is just players I love. Your entire secondary next year could be Ben Morrison, Zion McCollum, Jacob Parrish, Tyke Smith, and Antoine Winfield. Like, are we dead serious? That's just all players I love. Every single year they go and take these guys, and it's like, man, there is nobody who aligns with my like views on like DBs more than Todd Bowles. And I think if there's anybody you're gonna have the same viewpoints on, it's like Todd Bowles is a pretty good one. So, you know, I think there is always, when people analyze the draft, there's always like these validating picks where it's like, oh, well, if that person liked them, then yeah, I feel pretty justified in liking them. Like for me, if Todd Bowles takes a DB that I like, I'm like, okay, I feel good about that one because usually he's right, and it means usually I'm right. So I like Jacob Parrish a lot. I like Ben Morrison a lot. I think the secondary could be so fun. And it wasn't even just that. It's like the rest of their other picks. I literally think this team hit on every single one of their picks. Even like Tez Johnson in the 7th round. I'm not going to call it like a hit, but I mean, Tez has some abilities. A lot of people do like Tez, but I mean, unless you think he's going to be Tank Dell, that size is just going to be a little bit of a hurdle to get over. I don't think he'll be Tank Dell, but for a 7th round pick, I don't mind that. But the other 5 picks, I thought they knocked it out of the park with these other picks. So I guess we'll talk about Ibuka, since I kind of skipped to the secondary first, but Ibuka was a surprising pick, but I mean, Emeka Ibuka's so good. I was worried that he might not go round 1 because he's just not like number 1 elite receiver upside. To me, and I don't mean to say this just because of Ohio State, but I seen him a lot in the same way that I seen Jackson Smith and Jigba, where, you know, a lot of people were like having some crazy comps on Jigba. If you remember Jackson Smith and Jigba hype when he was coming out, people were trying to call him like Justin Jefferson. If you remember that hype when he was coming out, people were trying to like call him Justin Jefferson and compare him to these other Ohio State receivers. And I'm like, no, this dude is just a really great number 2, and maybe he could be a number 1, but like, this is just a amazing running mate, an amazing number 2. And last year he was tag teaming with DK Metcalf, and he goes out and has a great season. Now we'll see what he could do this year when he's going to be, you know, the guy potentially. We'll see how much, you know, him and Cooper Kupp kind of fight for that, but I would imagine JSN is going to be the guy for them next year, but we'll see. And then Ibuka, I mean, this dude is perennially flown under the radar as just the guy next to the star, you know, with Marvin Harrison and Jeremiah Smith there. It's like, well, he's never been able to be the guy, but he's been good the entire time. And, well, now he's going to Tampa Bay. We'll see how long Mike Evans plays at a high level, but for now, he doesn't have to be the guy. And I'm really curious about this pick, because this feels like a pick that, if you showed me this, I'm like, oh, they let Chris Godwin walk, didn't they? It's like, no, they kept Chris Godwin. So it's like, why do you have Chris Godwin still? Because I feel like you could have just let him go and just drafted Emeka Ibuka and be fine. Now, I would imagine this is probably the future, where you're looking at it and saying, okay, well, Godwin gets hurt a lot. Even though he plays well, he gets hurt a lot. So, you know, we'll have Godwin as insurance, maybe, or we'll have Ibuka as insurance for Godwin. But, like, at some point on the field, it will either be Godwin or Ibuka on the field. Sure, we'll see. The only player that I kind of feel bad for in this whole situation is I love Jalen McMillan. And it's like, man, what's going to happen with Jalen McMillan now? How much is he going to play? Because he's awesome. I love Jalen McMillan. But we'll see how they kind of piece that all together. I am excited for the future of this Buccaneers receiving corps. If you can have Jalen McMillan, Emeka Ibuka, and we'll see how good Mike Evans is for however long he has left in Tampa Bay. We'll see how good Chris Godwin is for however long he has in Tampa Bay. But now the Buccaneers, at least for this season, go 4 deep at wide receiver of really nice players. And the second Godwin inevitably suffers some sort of injury, because, you know, as much as I don't want him to get injured, it just keeps happening to the poor guy. But whenever that happens, Mike Evans sustains an injury. If somebody else goes down, well, you got Emeka Ibuka there, and he'll be the future guy to take over. So a lot of people are kind of being like, well, why did you make that pick? Like, I know why they made the pick. It's just interesting that that's where they went, but I'm not mad at it. And then you go to day 3, where David Walker, I mean, come on. Like, Like, I thought the Buccaneers could have went edge earlier. I thought first or second round edge was a possibility for them. I also thought Jahad Campbell was a possibility, and I wouldn't have been surprised maybe if the shoulder stuff didn't come out with Campbell, where, maybe he's got some injury issues. I thought Todd Bowles would be in love with the idea of having Jahad Campbell on this team, and I thought that that could very well happen, but, they needed some help. They didn't address linebacker in the post Levante David era, because they're going to need some sort of contingency plan there when Levante's eventually gone. But they needed edge rush help, and they spent their fourth and fifth round pick on edge, and thought they did a really good job. So Elijah Roberts as well, thought that's a really nice pickup, but more so David Walker, who was a really interesting player, small school guy, wrecked the small school level, never transferred up to, FBS level, but I mean, he's a little older, but he was so good when he played, and he has a lot of stuff that translates very well to the NFL level. And if there's, a handful of guys that I'm trusting, like, yeah, go put a player like David Walker and his talent, go put him in the hands of Todd Bowles and see what happens. Like, this could be their number one edge, and I'm not going to be surprised if he's the most productive edge rusher pretty early on in his Buccaneer career. So I look at this team and I say, round 1 you hit, round 2 you hit, round 3 you hit, round 4 you hit, round 5 you hit, and you didn't have a 6th round pick, but round 7, not bad. This is a draft where it's like they didn't make any mistakes. I don't think they made a single mistake in this draft, and there's not many teams that you could say that for. So yes, I gave this an A grade. Is it cumulatively as good of a haul as some other teams, and some other teams that I put an A grade on and a top 5 grade on? No, because they only had 6 picks. But when you want to talk about a team, no team maximized the picks that they had in this draft more than the Buccaneers. I thought they did an incredible job. So that will wrap things up for the draft grades. You guys can let me know if you agree, if you thought that the Buccaneers, maybe I'm overrating them a little bit, but I just love this draft class so much. I think they did an amazing job. And maybe you don't like the Ibuka pick that much. Maybe I'm a little too low on the Saints draft class, and maybe I'm hating on Jaylen Walker and Tyler Shough so much unnecessarily. We'll see how that all pans out. But, whatever disagreements you may have, at the end of the day, it ain't that deep, I guess I would say. Like, we're all trying to have fun grading these drafts and, seeing, in a couple of years when we come back to them and how right or wrong we were. So, I would say just don't get, like, mad about it. It is what it is. I know some people get, like, really mad if you say, like, their team had a bad draft. It's like, okay. It's not really something worth getting mad about. It's just something fun we do after the draft. So I hope you guys all enjoyed. Like I said, trying to get all these videos out in the next week. 8 videos in a week is more than I usually do. So any support is much appreciated. Like, comment, and subscribe. And I hope you all enjoyed. And I'll see you guys all in the next one.